Happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. I mentioned about, I would say a week ago, that I wanted to do this. I'm on a quest to find out more about my history, leading all the way back in the Bible from Genesis. But this is actually where I came across this probably a couple of years ago on a YouTube, where his name is Henry Louis Gates. He actually helps one to find out about their, history, learning more about where they're from. I mean, it's not only for African American, it's also for European ones that came from Europe. So we're going to start off with four. I want to say it's interesting parts to it, but it's each segment is like 50 something minutes long. So I may stop here, there, and talk a little bit, and then pick back up on next week. I want to do this on Sundays, and that's when I chose to do it, to actually just actually share with others, and maybe this might inspire you, like it's inspiring me to be able to get out in the forefront and look for answers and ask questions, and knowing to start asking anyone in your family, your elders, oldest member of your family, questions about things they know. That could help a great deal. But you're going to see some ways how Henry Louis Gates get to the nitty gritty part of it, and him and his team. I mean, they've worked with all these different celebrities and a lot of different people to help them, understand their heritage, their lineage. So I'm just super excited. But you'll see how these things are unfold and what they bring back to them. So we're going to start off right now. And for those who don't know me, I'm Darlene Pierce Noble, and I'm super excited. Like I said, I wanted to do this on a Sunday, and just to bring, some information out and may inspire those who would like to be in the number of getting theirs done and getting their DNA test as well, to check about their status, and then actually can break it down to see how many different, like if you have, far as your DNA, you might, just have different nationality that is in your bloodline, and you may never have known it. Okay, so it's going to start off with Oprah, and also his name is Henry Louis. So I'm going to just flip over right here. And you'll be able to see a little bit more. So that's T.D. Jakes right there, as you see it. Try to open this up a little bit wider. Y'all welcome.
First person in your family to own land.
That's amazing, man. I wasn't even allowed in the house to sleep.
And they begin to find their place in history.
This is mine. This is mine.
Next on African American Lives. African American Lives is made possible by...
I've always been around you, keeping you warm with my stories told through discarded scraps of cloth, woven into a tapestry that not only shielded from the cold, but helped point the way to freedom. I've always been around you, as a reminder that struggle only increases strength, and in its fire is born yet another art form. What others discard, we recreate, inventing expression that is co-opted, embraced, and then resold. But don't worry, I'm your granny's quilt, and I'll always be around you.
Downy, celebrating our heritage. She has her great-great-great-grandmother's eye for adornment. He is fit and agile, like his forefathers. Like his ancestors before him, he is the neighborhood's best cook. Discovering our past helps us understand how we came to be who we are today. The Coca-Cola Company is proud to join the exploration.
everyone who's tuning in. This segment right here is about 54 minutes long, so I may stop it and because I just got out of the audition just moments ago, so I will be getting some other updates.
For millions of
I just wanted
immigrants,
to
the
touch
gateway
bases.
to the
Hi,
new world.
Marcia.
Today, their descendants come to this place, seeking a connection to the past.
That was Mr. Gates, Lewis
my
Gates.
friends who can come here and celebrate
Henry.
their ancestors' journey and trace them through the records so diligently compiled here. They can even type the name of their ancestor into a computer and access the record of the day of their arrival. Unfortunately, there is no Ellis Island for those of us who are descendants of survivors of the African slave trade. Our ancestors were brought to this country against their will. When they arrived, they were stripped of their history and their identities. For generations, we have been unable to learn about our African heritage or our family trees. But what if we could trace our roots? What stories would we discover? What ancestors would we meet? What if we could even travel through time, across the Atlantic Ocean, and find where our ancestors came from in Africa? Now, thanks to miraculous breakthroughs in genealogy and genetics, we can begin to do just that. This series will follow 9 African Americans as we take the once unimaginable journey into the Black Past.
Oh, it's possible to find out what I am and who I am and what part? Oh my goodness.
Like all of my guests, Academy Award-winning actress Whoopi Goldberg will make dramatic and startling discoveries about her family history.
And now here you come with that key.
These guests and I will attempt to find our ancestors' place in the epic journey of the African American people.
I've been through hell, but I'm still here. I've been through hot water, but I'm still here.
For Bishop T.D. Jakes, one of America's most influential religious leaders, family members hold the secret to a long-buried tragedy.
I didn't really know until recently the real story, because this is not the real story.
Genealogical records hold the clues to discovering unknown ancestors for neurosurgeon Ben Carson, astronaut Mae Jemison, and media mogul Oprah Winfrey.
I know I come from this. I didn't know their names and backgrounds, but I know I come from this.
Even guests who can't trace their family trees hundreds of years will discover new stories about their ancestors in the Civil War.
Oh my goodness.
Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot is an award-winning author and a professor at Harvard. Quincy Jones is a legendary composer and music impresario. Quincy even wrote the score for Roots, that first journey back to Africa.
Why do you think Roots captured the imagination of the country?
Because it's information that people just think people did not know, black or white.
Revolutionary advances in DNA analysis will help all of my guests get their first glimpse at their African heritage. Chris Tucker is one of the world's most brilliant comedians and popular film stars.
Well, I look like a chief.
Does he look like a chief?
We will start in the present and move back through history, discovering ancestors, their lives, and the times in which they lived. Our quest for heritage begins with the relatives we know, our parents and our grandparents. They lived through the 20th century, a period of enormous transformation, turmoil, and progress. In this chapter, we will explore 4 families whose experiences embody these dramatic changes in the African American community. And we start with you, Oprah Gayle Winfrey, born January 29, 1954, in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Now, if you open this little magic book, there is our girl. What a beautiful child.
Well,
What a cute kid.
you know what? You say that now.
Oprah Winfrey is one of the wealthiest women in the world, a far cry from the rural poverty of her southern youth.
When I was a little girl growing up in, rural Mississippi, my grandmother used to say to me, what you want to do is grow up and get yourself some good white folks.
Oprah Winfrey was raised by her grandmother, Hattie Mae Presley, for the first 6 years of her life. Her parents never married. Both moved out of Mississippi. Left behind, Oprah faced the limited opportunities and daily struggles of black life in the Deep South. Even then, Oprah always believed that she would achieve more.
I remember standing on the back porch and looking through the screen door, and my grandmother was boiling clothes in a big black pot, and she had the clothespins in an apron on her sash, and she said, and I was churning butter. I was supposed to be churning anyway. So I was churning, and every time she turned around, I'd churn, and then when she's not looking, I would stop churning. And she said, Oprah Gail, I want you to pay attention to me now. I want you to watch me. Yeah, Grandma, because one day you're going to have to learn how to do this for yourself, she said to me. And I watched and looked like I was paying attention, but distinctly recall a feeling that no, I'm not. No, I'm not. That this will not be my life. And she'd say, I want you to grow up and get some good white folks. And I regret that she didn't live to see that I did get some good white folks working for me. Yeah. So she couldn't imagine this life. She couldn't imagine it, yeah.
We live in a world so very different than the world inhabited by our parents and our grandparents. How can we even begin to understand their lives? We begin by listening to their stories.
Maud's brother
was what?
Killed in Ohio?
In a gambling game.
Oh, I never heard that story.
I told you that, didn't I, Rob?
My quest to dig deeper for roots brings me to my father's hometown, Cumberland, Maryland. Daddy is my hero, the man who ignited my passion for family history.
You always told Rocky and me stories about Jane Gates, about the Bradys, about Pap and Pop and Aunt Helen. What was it Skip used to say? Tell me some more lies, Daddy.
I was getting ready to tell you that.
Memories such as these form the building blocks of family history. They are the stories that survive in our kitchens and in our living rooms. Stories that tell it like it is about the way it was, the way it used to be. Some are humorous. Others are painful, even embarrassing. But all of them make up the essence of African American history.
Rode the buses, sit on the back of the buses. We got on one day, I helped my wife on, and she stepped up, Major took a hold of her and pulled her back, stepped on in front of her.
What'd you do, Daddy?
What could I do? There was nothing I could do about it.
To tell you the truth, whenever I learn even the smallest detail about my father's life, I understand him and myself much better. I want to help my guests do the same. "5 minutes in his church in Dallas makes it clear why so many Americans worship each week with Bishop Jakes. His church rocks. The bishop makes me want to jump up and do the holy dance, and I have a broken ankle.
So, my friend, Bishop T.D. Jakes, this is your family tree.
Wow.
We're going to walk you through this family tree. This is you.
Okay.
Thomas Dexter Jakes.
That's me.
Born June 9th, 1957.
Absolutely.
In South Charleston, West Virginia. And here you are, my good brother. Your baby picture.
Wow.
Remember when these photographs were taken? Walk us through.
Pretty much. We lived on Vandalia Hill in Charleston, West Virginia. Down at the bottom of the street. In that picture, I was very, very small, and that's my brother looking over at me. And I vaguely remember that picket fence.
All black neighborhood, I presume.
Yes, all black neighborhood till you got to a certain street, and then it became all white. You know, you know what I mean?
The Berlin Wall.
Yeah, the Berlin Wall, exactly. And it was a great experience. It was a sense of community.
Bishop Jakes and I were both born in the hills of West Virginia, but his ancestral roots followed the traditional African-American path down to the deep South.
Well, let's focus on your father's side of your family tree. And there's your father, Ernest Jakes, and he was born in 1925 in Hattiesburg.
Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Did your father ever talk about his childhood?
Yes, and talked a little bit about the times that they lived in back then. And, you know, Mississippi was pretty racist, and some of the challenges they had in the early years.
But did your father, you know, we always, Bishop, hear negative stories about Mississippi. But did your father ever tell you, when you were growing up in West Virginia, any positive stories about how wonderful it was?
My father loved Mississippi. My father's buried in Mississippi. In spite of the adversity and the racial climate, it was still a lot of love there and a simple style of living. My father would get up under a shade tree with a glass of iced tea, and you would think he had died and gone to heaven. I mean, he loved it. He absolutely loved it. And I don't think his heart never really left Mississippi.
Well, if life was so grand, why they moved up to West Virginia?
I think money.
Really?
I think money. I think economics. People who had ambitions and goals often moved to the north, looking for the promised land. You know, they probably didn't find it when they got there, but they were really trying to expand their horizons, escape some of the racism, the extreme racism, and find ways to better themselves.
The Jakes family was not alone in their move out of the South. They were part of the largest population shift in American history, the Great Migration. At the dawn of the 20th century, our people were predominantly poor, Southern, and agrarian. 75 years later, we had migrated to every region in the nation, occupying virtually every profession. Sparked by an industrial boom during World War I, blacks were lured to northern factory jobs. They were also escaping the racism, segregation, and violence that defined black-white relations in the South. Quincy Jones was a child of the Great Migration.
You were born in 1933. Quincy Delight Jones.
Jr.
Quincy Delight Jones Jr.
Delight with two T's. I couldn't believe it. Is that ghetto?
Is it two T's?
Two T's.
Two T's. Oh, that's great.
I don't know where that came from.
No individual has been more central to African American culture over the past 60 years than has Quincy Jones. From playing the trumpet in big bands to producing the best-selling album of all time, Michael Jackson's Thriller, Q has done it all. As we'll see, Quincy Jones is still struggling to come to terms with the mysteries that surround his family in the 1930s.
This is Sarah Frances Wells, who is your mother. She's a pretty lady.
Oh, poor baby. She was. And so smart and so intelligent.
Born in 1903, Quincy's mother was part of the first wave of the Great Migration.
This is your mother's father.
Right.
Love Adam Wells. Man, I love that name. Now, he was your maternal grandfather.
That's right. This is the one that brought them up to St. Louis.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. What I heard that he was running a brothel in Mississippi for some white dudes, and at one point they wanted to put his daughter, my mother, and all of her sisters, my aunts, in that brothel. He got a car and was out of there and took him to St. Louis.
Amazing.
Guys were on his tail. There's a lot of drama there, which nobody still explained to me. You know, they don't talk about it.
Yeah, but why? That was my next question. In the 50s, I was born in 1950. They wouldn't talk about family history for all the tea in China.
Neither did in the 30s. Especially in the 30s.
Yeah, but
because
why?
too much went on. You know, when you're on the run, man, you do not care about lineage.
Quincy's mother, Sarah Frances Wells, started life on the run. But by 1930, she had found a new home on the south side of Chicago. When Southern blacks like Quincy's mom flooded into cities across the country, they changed the identity of African American culture as well as the landscape of America.
How they were dressed, everyone. That's just probably on every given day. Just decked out every day.
Factory workers. Black people abandoned farm life, nature, and the horizon and crowded into all black vertical high-rises. the dark ghetto was born.
Chicago was the biggest black ghetto in America, and it was a society all to itself with every of the totally diversified strata.
Here, in the 1930s, Quincy's parents, Quincy D. Light Jones Sr. and Sarah Frances Wells, met and started a family.
We came up in the Depression in Chicago. Chicago was no joke. Every street had a gang. You couldn't go from one block to another. You had the Giles AC gang, you had the Vagabonds, you had the Scorpions. Every street had a gang. And it was tribal.
Black and white?
It was tribal. No. Oprah with no white. We never saw white people there. And to get to school every day was like a kamikaze trip, you know. Switchblade through here. I was 6 years old.
You did?
They had to sort of switchblade there to the fence, and my daddy hit him in the head with a hammer. Ice pick here. I thought I was gone, and there was drama, you know. Huh. But it's, it was rough. It was no joke, man.
And still yet, Chicago is still there, you all. Not probably as worse, but wow.
They faced a new breed of hardship in the cities. Crime, overcrowding, residential segregation. Each new northern family had to find some way to survive. Strangers in a most strange land.
And this is you and Lloyd, right?
Yes. It was funny, you could see, even then, I don't know why this happened, maybe it's because we're alone so much, but you can see the protective thing I had with him. Don't nobody mess with my little brother.
Don't nobody mess with my little brother. I'll whoop your ass.
I'm telling you, man, you see that look, man. I dare you to even look at him funny. Look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's attitude right there. The same thing here, and that was like that all of my life, man.
The Great Migration was necessarily a narrative of ascent, of progress, of moving on up. But moving always entails loss. Loss of familiarity and habit.
Oh, so cute.
The move north meant leaving so much behind. A way of life that was decades old. Family members. And of course...
She loved me a little bit right there, you all. I see my eyes. Oh my gosh. Look at there.
Winfrey. Her parents lived separate lives. Hundreds of miles away from the Mississippi farm where Oprah lived with her grandmother. In 1960, however, when she was 6 years old, all that changed.
All those years, my primary relationship was with my grandmother. And all of a sudden, just one day, I'm packed up and put in a car and said, told you're going to go live with your mother now.
Oh, that must have been horrible.
It was horrible, horrible. But something inside me clicked then. Something just, I knew now I don't have my grandmother anymore. I'm going to have to take care of myself. Now, this is what happened. We moved to Milwaukee, and my mother at the time was living at a woman's house named Mrs. Miller.
Colored lady.
Mrs. Miller was a colored lady, but very light-skinned colored lady who did not like colored people.
Oh.
Was one of those. I was a nappy-headed colored child, and she would say it. And I was put out on the porch to sleep.
Oh.
There was like a little vestibule porch area where you came in and left your shoes before you went into the house. And so I wasn't even allowed in the house to sleep.
The horrible ways we've internalized racism.
Yeah.
And the ways we've visited pain on each other.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah.
it is an unfortunate but vital part of African American history.
During the Great Migration, every African American torn from their roots struggled to create a foundation in their new city. Oprah's father, Vernon Winfrey, who had moved to Nashville, Tennessee, embraced the work ethic that he had learned on his father's farm. It helped him to purchase the barbershop where he still works today.
I was looking for better opportunities. So I came to Nashville with in mind taking up a trade. I didn't finish high school until I was 25 years old. And I missed a couple of better paying jobs after I was in Nashville because I didn't read as fast as I should have for the job I had. Bad jobs, paying jobs. So I emphasized to Oprah of getting something here that no one can take from you. She complained sometime about other children dressing better than she did. I says, you get something here and you can dress like you want to in days to come. And everything worked out. She can dress pretty good now if she want to.
Amen.
Oprah! Now I know you told me not to tell nobody, but I done told everybody that we getting married. So you don't have to do no press release or nothing like that.
As my youngest guest, Chris Tucker is just beginning to learn about his past. We discovered that Chris has emerged from an extraordinarily rich family history.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
How you doing, Christos?
What's happening? Why you ain't call before you came over? That's why. How you doing? See you, Skip?
Because you never answered the phone, that's why.
How you doing? Yeah, you better not be lying, because you be lying.
We couldn't find you, man. You're a white man.
What?
You're a white
You
man.
said I won't get no more black movies.
Chris's journey will ultimately lead him back to the shores of Africa. But it begins with his immediate family and their roots in the red clay of Georgia.
How much time do you spend here? 'Cause you spend a lot of time in Atlanta, right?
Yeah, I'm back and forth, from here in Atlanta, so it's like 50-50.
Why do you spend so much time in Atlanta?
I miss home, and my mom's there, my daddy there, so, my whole family's there, so I'm always back and forth.
Are you centered there?
Oh, yeah, Georgia. Georgia's just like, it's my home, and the people, I get something there. Every time I go back, it's something, so I just love going back.
We wanted to find out how growing up in a large Southern family shaped Chris. So we followed him home to Atlanta on Mother's Day to find out.
I have 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and we're all close. I learned a lot being the youngest kid, watching my brothers make mistakes, my sisters make mistakes, and, watching what they did right. So I learned a lot, got a lot of wisdom. My sister, Tammy. I think comedy comes out of real stuff. And being in a big family, something funny happen all the time because you got so many things, interacting, somebody trying to get in the bathroom. There, remember your bike got stolen, the next door neighbor you didn't do nothing about it?
The next door neighbor took the bike, that's right.
You see the bike, you see the bike every day. But Darren, that's your bike? Shut up.
He was riding the bike, yeah.
Mama, that's Darren's bike. Shut up. We knew that he painted the bike. We knew it is. We said, Darren, you know that's your bike. That ain't my bike, it's blue. You just ruined everything. Family, it all comes back down to the family. I always knew I had a strong family. Even though when I moved out of California, if it didn't work out, I'd come back home and tell jokes in the living room. So, didn't matter.
It's just family today. Isn't that special?
We want to say Happy Mother's Day to the best mama in the whole wide world.
Show them how you do it. You're on camera, but
Chris is the product of a closely knit Southern family. They laid the foundation for all of his success. We must explore our family's history to understand the myriad ways that they have shaped us. Sometimes our ancestors' experiences are inspiring. Sometimes they are tragic. For T.D. Jakes, they are both.
My parents were hard workers. They were industrious. They were entrepreneurial. They were people of values. My father was particularly a hard worker. Started a business with a mop and a bucket and ended up with 52 employees back in the 60s.
Janitorial?
In janitorial service, yeah.
In
that's
Charleston?
Right. That's right.
They had to be some of the few entrepreneurs who were black in Charleston, West Virginia at that time.
True.
I mean, how did they get this spark to become entrepreneurs?
I don't know. I think they were dreamers. They were aggressive and they were ambitious, and they were trying to get somewhere. My mother managed to instill a great deal of pride and self-respect enough to believe that you had some high purpose calling, that you were going to be be somebody, boy.
Right.
Leave your mark on the world. Let the world know you was here.
By the mid-1960s, the Jakes family was finally reaping the benefits of their hard work. They had moved into the middle class, and they even owned their own house. But their good fortune ended when T.D.'s father was diagnosed with diabetes.
That was a very difficult time of life for me. I had to grow up quickly. There was no room at that point for a child. And I knew he was sick, but I'm not sure that I really believed he could die. Because he was my hero. And Superman can't die, can he? Captain America didn't die. Mighty Mouse didn't die. Daddy couldn't die. This was very difficult for me. Very difficult.
After 6 years of illness, T.D. Jake's father passed away. His untimely death would lead a devastated young T.D. by fits and starts into the sanctity of the church.
My father told me, he said, by the time I figured out what life was all about, it was time to go. And that struck terror in my heart. I thought, oh, I got to figure it out quicker than that. Because I can't wait till the end and then know what it's all about. And then I go, so it was almost like solving a mystery, which drove me to the Bible looking for answers, because I thought, when in doubt, go to the Creator. He knows what it's about.
Amen.
And I really never thought so much about being a preacher. I started studying the Word of God, looking for the answers of life for me.
I'm ready to change. I'm ready to go through a
glory.
I'm ready to be renewed. I'm ready to evolve into what God had in mind for me from the foundations of the world. I'm ready to change. I don't even want to be hooked up with people that don't want to change.
Memories of pain, hardship, tragedy,
Cotton
and
field.
even death.
Wow.
Are an
I never picked cotton, you all. And my sister on here, I don't know if you, did you ever pick cotton, Joyce?
6 and 14, Oprah Winfrey was shuttled back and forth between her father in Nashville and her mother in Milwaukee.
I never developed deep roots or connections to either parent because I never knew at what time I was going to be pulled one from the other.
It was just arbitrary.
Yes, decide this summer you're going to go here, and then next summer you're going to go here. And we're going to be a family and so forth. So, but the summer of my 9th year, I was raped. And so that changed things immensely for me because I was raped and then kept that secret for a long time. And then while living with my mother, the boyfriend of my mother's cousin, who my mother was also living with, the boyfriend of my mother's cousin, was also a constant sexual molester of mine. And so I just felt like this is what happens to you. I felt like I was marked somehow. But also felt...
Did you think it was your fault?
Of course I thought it was my fault. Of course I thought it was my fault. And I was about 40 when I stopped thinking it was my fault. And then there was this sick thing going on. My cousin who lived with us was also a battered woman. And I used to bargain with her boyfriend that he could have sex with me if he wouldn't beat her.
Oh.
Wow. And I said, God, okay, I'll go with you if you promise not to beat Alice.
Oh,
yeah.
But what a dilemma to be in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like being in hell.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Wow.
And so this is what I didn't realize until many shows later. I got all my therapy on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I became a sexually promiscuous teenager. So I was out in the streets. I ran away from home. I was going to be put in a detention center, and ended up being sent to my father.
Because you were out of control.
Because I was out of control.
Well, when she moved back at 14, I don't think she really wanted to come back. But her mother said that she was out of hand. And she had sent her back to me for me to straighten her out.
Life in her father's house was a world apart from Oprah's life back in Milwaukee. Vernon Winfrey tolerated no disobedience.
Spent many late hours once she came back, trying to get her back in the groove that she was in before she left. Her mother lost control of her. Lost control.
Nashville gave Oprah a lifeline. The discipline and stability of her father's home, her last chance to save herself. But the situation was far worse than her father ever dreamed.
Well, this is the thing. I was pregnant when I came to my father.
For those who are still on, can y'all still hear it?
And had made an announcement. The rules are going to change. If you make the decision to run away, then you will stay away. you're going to have a curfew. The curfew will be obeyed. You will bring in the grades that you were capable of bringing in. Just really sat down and had that conversation in the kitchen and said to me that he would rather see a daughter of his dead floating down the Cumberland River than to bring shame on the Winfrey name.
And you knew you were pregnant?
And I knew I was pregnant.
Oh my God, what did you do?
All I thought about was dying and how could I kill myself. And shortly after that, I went into labor. I had the baby, and the baby died.
Yeah.
The baby died. And my father came in and said to me, "This is your second chance." He said, "We were prepared, Zelma and I, my stepmother, to take this baby and let you continue your schooling. But God has chosen to take this baby. And so I think God has given you a second chance. And if I were you, I would use it."
After she had the baby and it didn't live very long, I think that was a burden enough for her. And pretty soon, she came back in line, as I say.
I mean, did you think of him as a terrible authoritarian, or was he a loving, kind, sympathetic person?
He was both. He was, I would not say, my father was not, he is not sympathetic or nurturing. He's really kind of, he is, the best way to describe him is an honorable man.
I just had my rules, and, you just had to kind of go by my rules. She appreciates that today. She's told me that if I had not been a strict disciplinarian, that she would be somewhere maybe in public housing with a bunch of children and babies. She's thanked me several times for it.
Unfortunately, not all of us have strong parents to help us to cope with tragedy. Sometimes, if we're lucky, we can find a surrogate family to take their place. That's what Quincy Jones did.
To this day, I do not know what the word mother means. It has no emotional meaning to me.
For Quincy, the loss of his mother, Sarah Frances Wells, turned his childhood upside down.
My mother was taken away to a mental hospital at 7 years old. Something, whatever happened, it could have been the sociological climate then or whatever, that she just could not get a grip. So I remember them putting her, lying her down upstairs, and 4 guys pushed her down on the bed, and this will never leave me, to see her with them putting a straitjacket on her when she was on the bed. And I took her away. She went to Boston University in the 20s. She was a brilliant lady.
A motherless child in the ghetto, Quincy's life teetered on the verge of chaos. But in his darkest hour, Quincy found salvation in a most unlikely place.
Only thing we had, and I didn't realize that I had music in me until I was 11. And then, thank God, we found Basie, and Duke Ellington, and Erskine Hawkins, and Louis Armstrong, and all of the bands, big bands. Big bands turned my life around. Every night I'd stand in front of those bands and just like an absolute addict. The idea of 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, and 5 saxophones in a rhythm section, and a group of black men that were dignified, unified, fun, worldly, and smart, and talented. I mean, man, I said, this is the family I want to be in. And when things would get really rough, found a way to convert all needs from mother. I said, if I don't have one, I don't need one. I transferred every feeling I should want, need from, and give to my mother to the music. I made music my mother.
Here you are, born in 1971 in Georgia, and we go back to your parents.
Chris Tucker has the only family in our series that refused to join the mass migration from the south to the north. In fact, his family has lived in Georgia continuously since slavery.
Wow.
To begin to understand the relationship between Chris's family and their home place, we go back to a relative who resisted the migration.
This is your mama's daddy, your maternal grandfather, and he is the Reverend Theodore Arthur Bryant Jr. Now, he was born in the Flat Rock community in Lithonia, Georgia in 1922. Let's open the scrapbook.
Flat Rock.
That is your granddad.
He look like my mom.
And who else does he look like?
He look like me.
He looks like you, man.
Yeah,
He looks like a clone. And he's styling, too.
Look at that. Oh, my gosh.
Photo
He
of
looked
him and
just
his
like him.
cousins on their way to pick up their dates. Now, look how clean they were, man.
They sharp, honey.
Now, what type of man is he?
He's just a smart man.
You close to him?
You know, we wasn't that close growing up, but now we are. We are. So he's a you know, and I'm blessed that he's still here, that I can get a chance to get close to him.
I asked Chris himself to interview his grandfather, the Reverend Theodore Arthur Bryant, to learn about segregated life in the South.
You know, during that time, back in the 20s and 30s, you had to be careful and know what to say, when to say it, where to say it, who to say it to, or know what not to say, mostly.
I pray you also can hear me, because sometimes my speaker go out.
T.A. Bryant was growing up. Economic opportunities for African Americans in the South were as scarce as hen's teeth. The vast majority of black farmers were sharecroppers, and their lives, to coin a phrase, were brutal, harsh, and short. Most African Americans, of course, had to rent land at exorbitant rates. It was a kind of neo-slavery, the sharecropper system.
Right.
And they were illiterate. Now, because they couldn't manage their own transactions, they were vulnerable, and they were often paid less than their fair share. However, going back a generation from your father, we come to your paternal grandfather, and his name was Elmore Winfrey. Your grandfather, Elmore, successfully managed his own 250-acre farm. This is truly remarkable for a person who was black and who lived at his time. Now, this is some serious land.
That's serious land.
So we
And
want
hard to do and to hold on to and be respected.
Yeah, because you think white people come and burn you out, or you know, say, nigga, you too uppity.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because racism was about economics.
Yes.
That's what it was about. It wasn't about skin color. That was the metaphor for deeper economic relationships. It was always fundamentally about who was going to control the pie, who got the biggest share of the pie.
Do you have my father saying about how my grandfather always was able to, he tells these stories about my grandfather being able to walk through town with his head up?
Well, he told us this amazing story. I don't know if he must have told you too. He told us that whenever your grandfather Elmore encountered white people, your grandfather had to tip his hat and say, yes, sir, and no, sir. And it embarrassed your father, of course.
My father had tipped his hat to all white folk. That was being polite, staying in his place. And I chastised him when I was 14, Daddy, why are you tipping your hat? He says, I was tipping my hat for you all. But when I went home to visit in 1957, my mother says, son, don't sleep in the back bedroom. I have 2 civil rights workers living with me. So I says, Dad, aren't you afraid to have these civil rights workers live with you, as white and black? He says, well, son, I've almost lived my 70. If anybody come and mess with me, you know how old Dad can shoot that shotgun. They might get me, but I'm going to take somebody with me. He said, it's time for a change. I've stayed in my place long enough.
Long enough. Wow. Amen.
Change did not come easily. Our ancestors who lived a century ago could only dream of the days when legal segregation would end. Their place was in the cotton field or in the Jim Crow car on the railroad. For those who dared to challenge the system, the consequences could be disastrous. Well, going back a generation on your family tree from your father, we come to your father's father, right here, and who shares your name?
Right.
Thomas D. Jake. Now, he's your grandfather, and he was born in 1906 in Atmore, Alabama, and we found his death certificate.
Wow.
And there is a death certificate. And it shows that your grandfather, T.D. Jake, died on June 9th, 1928 in Lucedale, Mississippi. Would you mind reading, Bishop, that highlighted part in yellow?
It says accidental drowning while bathing in swift current in creek.
Now,
for the cause of death.
Now that means that your father, Ernest, was only 3 when he lost his father. Did he ever talk to you about his loss?
No, he didn't. I heard my grandmother say more than my father did about her first husband. And I didn't really know until recently the real story, because this is not the real story.
At a recent family reunion, Bishop Jakes discovered that his family had withheld crucial information about his grandfather's death.
All of these years I was told that he died in a swimming accident.
He worked at a turpentine camp, and he lived on one side of the lake. My mama said every day at noon he'd swim home. Instead of walking around the lake, he'd just dive in there and swim home, come up at the house, get up, eat it, get his dinner, and go back to the bed. This day, he didn't show up for dinner. She later told me that he got in an argument with some of the men at the turpentine camp.
The white men?
Yeah. Some white men, they threw, that night before a year, they threw some barbed wire in the lake. And when he dived off, and he may dive and come up way over yonder. They know how he did. He died off in there, and the barbed wire tangle caught him, and that's why they found him dead.
They murdered him.
So he was murdered.
He was murdered.
He was murdered. Well, back then.
And he was 23 years old?
Yeah, he only was 23 years old. So that was the way he spent his little 23 years.
And my grandmother kept waiting on him to come home. He never came home for dinner, and they found him tied in the barbed wire in the lake.
That's a terrible story.
You know how things were back then. And they set him up. They murdered him. Yeah.
My.
Fear, violence, discrimination, humiliation. These terms define the worst aspects of black life under segregation.
Starting in about 1910, black people just fled the South in enormous numbers because they wanted to get the heck out of the South and get to the North. How come your family never moved?
You know, I don't know. I guess that's just, it's in the blood.
As we move further back into Chris's family history, the relationship between his ancestors and their community becomes quite intriguing. 3 generations of Chris's family were at the heart of a small rural community, Flat Rock, Georgia, that was somehow untouched by the Great Migration. These ancestors hold the key to the mystery of how, despite the odds, this town clung together.
Now look at these pictures. This photograph is from around 1890, Chris, over 100 years ago. And that dude right there in the center is Spencer Bryant, your great-great-grandfather. And all the other guys around him are trustees of the church. And he is the principal deacon.
Goodness gracious. How y'all find this picture, man? Whoa.
And this is the Flat Rock Methodist Church in 1916. It's where your family attended church.
And we go back in church.
Now, you know how important that religion is for our people today. Imagine how much more important it was to keep the community together in the 1880s and the 1890s.
We went back to Flat Rock. A century later, Chris's family is still at the heart of the same church.
I was born in this church.
Chris's grandfather, the Reverend Theodore Arthur Bryant Jr., is retired now, but he remains a key member of the congregation. A rural church such as Flat Rock United Methodist is the lifeblood of its small but loyal community. A large-scale exodus of its congregation would not only have destroyed the church, it would have broken the town of Flat Rock itself. How in the world did Chris's ancestors resist the migration when everyone around them was moving north? To answer this question, we have to look at the life of Reverend Bryant's father, Theodore Arthur Bryant Sr. He is Chris's great-grandfather.
This is Papa?
That's him.
What?
He was born December 13th, 1896 in DeKalb County. Now, we started looking for records from his life, and Chris, look what we found. This is a land deed from 1925. Now, what it says is that your great-grandfather purchased 45 acres of farmland in Flat Rock for $600. Chris, this is a major accomplishment, man. $600, first of all, in 1925 was a lot of money. Secondly, very few black people were selling out $600 for land anywhere in the United States. And he is the first person in your family to own land.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, we was always proud that he had like all his property when we used to go down there. But I never knew how much it cost. $600 like today is nothing, but back then I bet you it was...
Yeah, well, $600 then is a lot more money.
It's still a lot of money now. What I'm talking about?
African Americans, buying land
This is too
represented
much.
the first step in freeing themselves from the servitude of sharecropping. But we found land deeds that contained a mystery. Over the next 40 years, Chris Tucker's great-grandfather, T.A. Bryant Sr., sold off pieces of his property at least 30 different times. Sometimes the lots were as small as 2 acres. Now, as I said, we were trying to figure out why would he sell little bits of property here and there. What story are these land deeds trying to tell us? Why would an African-American farmer buy and sell small lots of land over and over again, precisely when so many of his neighbors were fleeing the South? Chris's grandfather, Reverend Bryant, took us to the original piece of land that his father purchased some 80 years ago.
Now, this is the old home house. Born and reared right here. My dad accumulated all this himself. He was the type of person who wanted to do things his way. And, you know, by owning his own land, he could do it his way. He didn't have to answer to anybody. And I plowed all of that land, all of that back in there, and all of this land here around the house. And cotton, as far as you can see. Yeah.
Reverend Bryant rightly sees this house for the heroic monument that it surely is. For this was the very first property that any member of his family ever owned. This is the farm that sustained and supported his family for 40 years. Just as important, it was this farm that played a crucial historical role in saving this sturdy black community and the mighty walls of this determined little church.
Dad sold the land to relatives and some to some other people. Some was going north because of better jobs. In some cases, to get away from segregation. And my dad was determined to try to keep enough people in the community to keep the church going. I think about it quite often, you know, how my dad sacrificed. If he hadn't, then the community would have gone down. There was another church in the community that didn't survive. It was an adjoining community that didn't survive, just ceased to exist.
You know, I knew the land was sold. Eventually, a lot of it was sold off, but I didn't know what was his motive.
He was trying to
that's
give,
amazing, man.
He was trying to give mistake in the South a reason to stay, because they were not going to own property in Pittsburgh, Detroit, or Cincinnati, in Philadelphia, or New York.
That's deep. To think like that. That's something I'll never forget. And this is blowing me away.
He
never
kept,
forget that.
in effect, he kept Flat Rock from moving to the north. He kept Flat Rock together.
That's amazing. I mean, whatever we do with our life, if we make it mean something, it's going to inspire generations. That's what's the power in knowing the history.
This
Oh
is
my gosh, you all.
history.
So
These
true.
little stories, which are huge stories for us individually, collectively make up the narrative of our people. This is how we got over, man. This is how we survived. This is how we overcame humongous, tremendously difficult odds to emerge as a people, the African American people.
Each generation Well, that's laid the foundation for the next one to happen, you know. Now we're looking at the biggest entrepreneurs that ever lived, you know, from hip hop, you know.
Yeah.
That ever existed with the black kids or black musicians or anything.
Yeah, but do you think that your success made them possible?
Oh, well, a lot of things we did, of course. Yeah, I think we all give each other hope, you know. I mean, Basie and Duke, and Benny Carter, they put me on their shoulders, you know. Literally, you know.
I feel that there was such sacrifices made. I feel deeply, and have always, even when I could not explain it, a deep, deep connection to those who've come before me. I feel that for, you know, Grace and Elmore and all the names. I often say this, that all the names that made the history book for the millions that did not.
Absolutely.
All the people who marched, but for those who couldn't march.
Right.
They were just out there washing clothes and ironing and taking them to the white folks' house and cooking and doing the best they could.
I heard Maya Angelou say something that it took me about a year to really understand. She came to speak for us, and she said, there's so many people standing on this stage. She said, there's hardly room for me. And I thought, what's she talking about? There's nobody up there but her. She said, all of my ancestors are crowded all around me. She said, scoot over so I can speak.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it was about a year before I really realized she was saying that she didn't get there by herself. That she was standing on the shoulders and the backs of everybody who had preceded her. And that is true of all of us.
She has her great-great-great-grandmother's eye for adornment. He is fit and agile, like his forefathers. Like his ancestors before him, he is the neighborhood's best cook. Discovering our past helps us understand how we came to be who we are today. The Coca-Cola Company is proud to join the exploration.
Mother, may I please go to the park across the street, play Simon Says and hide and seek? I'm standing with a smile like a little man. Yes, I've already washed my hands.
Hello, everyone. I hope y'all can hear me. I'm so emotional right now. Oh my gosh. I've seen this like 2 years ago, and you know, I didn't have that in me to want to like dig deeper and find out about my roots and then, but up until recently, I say about 3 months ago, or that's when I wanted to get an understanding of where, you know, all when line up back to even going back to slavery. I wanted to go where that thought came from, how that even came about, and never dawned on me that it actually started from the top of the Bible in Genesis with Noah. And I went through all that for the last 30 days, just looking through different aspects and reviewing different from Bible scholars and different ones. But even with all this, it comes back to this main point: understanding and knowing who you are. Who are you? What make within your bloodstream? What makes that up? It could be different, as far as when it comes to genetics from different nationalities. And whatnot. And so just understanding and knowing you, and it's just so wise, so important for you and each of us, the eldest person, the oldest person in our family, get with them and ask questions, because I could have had more answers if I would have asked my grandmom or my granddad, but I wasn't led to, and it wasn't even like in my lineup. But today, with time and how time and things are changing, it's time now, you all, to find out your roots. If you need to get with family members, ones that, it may be one that just stands out a little bit more, that know more. We end up was one of my first cousins. She died. She was battling cancer for a while, and we were at her sitting up, and there was a lady that was from Beaufort that was relative to us, and she, I may have met her before, but I didn't recall her. I don't recall her name now. But what was so interesting about it is that she shared about my grandfather, which is my dad's dad, that he had 11 kids, and we only knew the 4 or 5 that we knew of, and then we did know of one that lived in Beaufort. But out of all, he had another whole family before my grandmom, which is my dad's mom, and they had migrated up towards near Florence area, going into between is an area where we go Santee when we travel to go to town. But about 2 years ago, someone with the last name, well, it wasn't his last name, but he had family out of New York. He contacted me and one of my nephews and one of my nieces and say, well, your name Pierce, tell me a little bit about, because we have family members, a lost family. We're trying to find our relatives, and if you can share anything. And come to find out that we perhaps, and we still need to look further into it, but that was the family that was my grandfather's family. I asked my aunt, which is one of the daughters that's still alive, and I just asked her probably about a couple of months ago, and she didn't know much. She said she didn't know much. And so with that being said, you all, a lot of them that are living now and under 100 or whatnot, as a lot of them may not know much, because a lot of people, a lot of family did not talk about a lot of stuff. So in this actually quest, and with me sharing about Oprah, and you've seen T.D. Jakes, you've seen Chris Tucker, and also Quincy Jones, there will be others to come, and I will do a segment every Sunday as I feel led to, which I want to carry this out. But it's going to lead them all the way up to the bloodline of Africa, where they will actually fit, what tribe that they will belong to. So if you would like to continue to be with me on Sundays, or either you can go ahead of me and look at it because it's right on YouTube, you're welcome to do so. But I not only would do from our Africans descent, I will also do with European, also in reference to, I looked at one where it was Anderson Cooper off of CNN, his family line, his lineage, and some others as well that will come into play. So I just wanted to just put this out there today, and this has been in my heart, and I want to share it. And I just wanted to encourage those out there, to find out if you want to get your DNA test. I haven't really went through the whole process of understanding what I would need to do, how much it would cost. But as I find out, I will share. But not only that, just in line with just getting with family members and getting it started of the name, so you can have things to plug in, and you can try and do it on Ancestry.com. I remember when it was free. Now, honey, you're gonna pay. And I went on about 5-6 years before. I barely found anything, and then I went back on probably within this last year, and I found my father, where it hits the census, where it showed all my the 5 kids that I was saying under my father, his granddad. It was a census, a report that showed all that lived in the household, and that it was back in 1945 when it showed. So it's just amazing, and just to touch bases and see Oprah, her story, T.D. Jakes, his story, Chris Tucker, and you're gonna be, and I can just line and lead the way. Is Chris Tucker has a strong path, which you will see, which rich of richness, and you can, and it just didn't stop in the lineup from, as far as coming from Africa, and it stopped. They continue that path, and I'm not sure if more of their family stayed together and was able to make it in that, because you'll see where they didn't leave that city, that county, that town out of Atlanta, out of Georgia. They stayed there. They were the pillars that made other people not go up north in different places and venture out around the United States. So how interesting. So that's all I have, everyone. I thank you all for tuning in. I pray you also can hear me. Sometimes my speaker goes out, but I definitely feel led to share all this and do talking points throughout, and I may touch bases throughout the week with certain things, but I will definitely do this every Sunday around this time, and I'll put it out there. But again, thank you for watching. God bless you all. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.